Today is June 3rd, 2010. My name is Sue Paul, and I am at the Warhawk Air Museum. I am conducting a Veterans History Project today in conjunction with the Library of Congress. Today we have the honor of interviewing Mr. David Joseph Lynch. Welcome to the museum, sir. It is such an honor to have you here. Thank you for taking the time.
It's kind of you to say that.
Thank you. Also present in the room is Dave Bittler. He will be doing the filming, and Darren Robarts is here in training. Sir, could you give us your full name, please?
My full name is David Joseph Lynch.
And could you give us your current address?
My current address? Haven't been there too long, and I'd need to.
Okay.
425 West Edwards Avenue, Nampa, Idaho, 83686.
Okay.
2820.
Thank you. And could you tell us, sir, where you were born and the date that you were born?
I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, the 18th day of July, in the year of our Lord, 1918.
And could you tell us what division of the military that you served in?
I served in the United States Navy.
And the years in which you served?
From 1936 to 1940, and from 1942 to 46.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Lynch, you were born in Indianapolis, Indiana in 1918. Did you grow up there? Is that the town you grew up in?
Yes, through high school.
What was it like in those early years in Indianapolis?
I remember being in school, of course, and in high school. And I was the second of 9 children. Had one older brother, myself, and then altogether 6 boys and 3 girls.
Big family.
My father, as I mentioned, came from Ireland. My mother's parents came from Germany. So, when I graduated, one day I was walking down the street and somebody called my name. And I looked at him, and there stood a young man in sailor's uniform. He was my boyfriend when we lived the same neighborhood. And I missed him after a while. And then on this day, my name, and we talked. And
how many years later was that? How many years later did he call your name? Was that during the war years?
No, earlier than that. I was still in high school.
Now, you lived in Indianapolis then during the Depression years.
Yes.
What are your memories of the Depression to a child, to you? What was your experience?
My memories of the Depression start here. A knock came at the door of my house. I opened it. A man said, "Is Mr. Lynch here?" "Dad," I called. Dad came. I was curious. The man bade him step outside. I closed the door. I walked around and looked out the window, and I heard these words, "Mr. Lynch, I don't want your house. I want your house. I don't want your money. Mr. Lynch, I don't want your money. I want your house." In those days, deposits in the bank were not
guaranteed.
What?
Guaranteed?
Insured.
Mm-hmm.
Insurance. Mm-hmm. So my dad had money, but he couldn't get it. So in a short time, we moved out of that house, and there began a number of moves. As children came, we needed a bit bigger house. And
What did your father do for a living during those years?
my father, as I may have mentioned, my father came from Ireland, and he did real estate and insurance. That's what he did. And in the real estate, he was building a house, and then another house, and then another house. Lost it all. Lost it all.
So you all had some pretty dire money problems, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah. How did you survive?
One day at a time. I really was too young to understand what was going on. But
What were your joys in childhood? What were the things you liked to do the best all through high school?
well, now through high school, it was getting toward the senior year, and my homeroom teacher looked at my report cards, and she said to herself, but I heard her, oh dear, if only you'd gotten better grades sooner. She would have put my name in to go to college and see if she couldn't get some money to help me do that. But since I didn't do well, I didn't go to college.
Do you remember Charles Lindbergh?
I do,
Tell
though I never really, he was never at home when I went to visit him. And if you believe that, I've got another story I can tell you.
But as
But
a
yes.
young boy, what did you think of him?
I thought that was neat. I thought that was neat. Sure.
Yeah. And so you graduated from high school, and did your father get back on his feet again after the Depression? Was he able to
Never.
recoup? Never did?
Never. When I graduated, I told you I heard a voice called me. My friend joined the Navy, and he said, you could do that if you want to. I said, where? So he told me where. I went to the recruiting office, introduced myself, they welcomed me, and they signed me on. But I couldn't go yet because I was only 17. I graduated from high school at 17. You had to be, 18. So, but in the interim, the recruiting officer came to my home and to talk with my parents. I was a minor. Okay with you? Sure. So I'm signed. Then when I'm 18, I report down the recruiting office. The next thing I know, I'm hearing some guys say bad names toward me and others in the bus. We were down at the training center, and so there's a bit of a story there. While I was in high school, I had two boyfriends. One of them was in the National Guard. One day he said to me, David, how would you like to be in the National Guard? I don't know, what is it? So he told me a bit about it. He says, I'm leaving and they want me to find somebody. And so he found me and he brought me down to the recruiting office of the Indiana National Guard, introduced me to the company clerk who reached over, got a sheet of paper, cranked it up in the typewriter. Your name, David J. Lynch. Your birthday, July 18, 1918. Pause. Lloyd? Yeah? Come here. What do you want? Talk to Dave about his birthday. What? talk to David about his birthday. So I go out. And he said, "Oh, when is your birthday, David?" "July 18, 1918. "You're only 16. Now let's see, to be 18 you would have to be..." He figured out when I would have had to be born in order to be 18 years of age in the National Guard. So he came in, clerk went on, and the rest is history.
And so you waited until you graduated from high school, though? Did you wait until you went into the service?
Well, by that time, I was eligible. I was going into the Navy, so I was honorably discharged from the National Guard.
National Guard, I see. Okay. Wow. Did anyone else in your family, any of the other kids, go into the service at that time, too?
When my older brother Justin, heard that I had joined, he was in the CCC.
Right.
You know what that is?
Absolutely, yeah.
He came home, he joined. By this time I'm through boot camp and I'm aboard a ship, but that's the Maryland. I went aboard then, and it wasn't long until he came aboard.
The same
and
ship?
then sometimes, yes.
Wow.
And then came Bob when he was old enough, 18. Then came Joe, and all four of us were on the USS Maryland.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And then there was a tragic event in the Navy. There were 7, I think, brothers.
The Sullivan brothers. That was during World War II, during the Battle of Guadalcanal.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so they kind of stopped
They
all these
stopped
brothers
that.
from serving
Yes.
together. But so in in those early days, though, when you first went in, all 4 of you ended up going on the same ship. Was that good? You liked that, having all your brothers there?
In a way it was,
Mhm.
but it was pretty much like it was when we were at home.
Right.
When we were little, I remember we got a little red wagon for Christmas, and Justin was on it, and he was going around in the house, and I wanted to get on it, and he wouldn't let me. So I socked him on the head, but in the process, I scraped the wood door, and I had a splinter in my finger, so that put the end of that. But we were not together very much.
For how long were you on the same ship? How long were you guys all on that
That
ship
would be
together?
in 1936.
Yeah. Now you served in 1936 then on the USS Maryland, and you were on that for 2 years. Where were you on that ship? What did they do? Where'd you go?
1936 on the Maryland.
You were kind of in between wars yet,
Yes.
and probably you hadn't even heard much about. I mean, Europe was starting to have some pretty heavy rumbles by then, but
I was not paying any attention
yeah,
to
certainly
that.
most in the United States
No.
weren't in 1936.
But
And then you transferred to the USS West Virginia in 1938. And you were on that ship, it looks like, for 1 year before you went to the USS New Mexico.
let me tell you a story.
Great.
In 1936, I was a deckhand. That means you're up early in the morning, and ahead of you are some guys that have gone up on the main deck, and they got water all over the place, sprinkled sand all over the place, and you had a queer-looking device. Picture a brick, like an ordinary brick, a indent in the center of it, and a broomstick. Put broomstick in dent, put it down on the deck where the sand is, lean down hard on that stick, and go back and forth. forth and back and forth. That's cleaning the deck.
Mm.
When we finished that, well, the deck was practically white.
Mm.
So I was on the 6th Division, and we did that. And then...
Did you stay in the United States?
Hmm?
During those years, were you in the United States? You didn't go out of the U.S.?
Well, we had... I was on several ships during my first cruise, so we did go out and we practiced war during those years. But as far as my personal activity, let's see, we'd be out to sea. I had a battle station by a 16-inch gun with a turret. Huge, the biggest gun there was. And so I was out there one day, and I can't recall how it happened that I was standing by the turret when the gun went off, but I remember that it was loud. And I think that's the reason that I don't hear quite as good as I used to.
I think you're right.
Yes.
I think you're very definitely right.
Yeah.
Did you have any sense that you might go to war or not during those early years?
Then I became aware that a war was going on in Germany before I went in the service. And I was selling newspapers. One thing we did, because Dad's business was gone, Mother was making artificial butterflies and other things like that, and I was selling papers and going door to door to sell magazines. And an extra came out in the paper. Hitler blitzes some country over there. And that sounded great. Yeah, it sounded. So I felt I'm handling something here that had to do with war, and that's something. So that was the first touch with war. But
now, your mother's family was from Germany. Did your family have any?
My mother's parents, her family, were Germans.
Did they have any worries about that when Hitler? Did you ever hear in your family about any concerns about that?
I can recall no discussion with my parents about much of anything. The children came, they were giving their attention to the youngest one. So as the young ones came, that moves us back one. Another one, back. Sadly.
And all of you must have worked. All of you must have. So by the time you joined the Navy, you must have had a pretty good work ethic already behind you, huh?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you stayed in the first time in the Navy until 1940. What made you decide to leave? Why did you leave the Navy?
I'm glad you asked. Aboard the Maryland, they had a chaplain. You know what a chaplain is.
Absolutely.
And he had an office. And one day, his yeoman, a yeoman is the word equivalent to secretary.
Oh, okay.
He had a yeoman. The chaplain also had put together a choir, all sailors. And when we were in port, he usually had an appointment for us someplace, and the choir from the Maryland went there and we sang. And I loved that. I love to sing. Yes, I love to sing.
Did you sing in high school?
I did in high school. As a matter of fact, I majored in music.
Okay.
But what I want to come to now is that one day the chaplain's yeoman came to me and he said, "David, I'm going on leave for 30 days. Would you like to take my place?"
Wow.
Sure. And he said, "You can even sleep in the office if you want to." I wanted to know more the deck. That was the beginning, really, of my training. This way. I mentioned that my father was from Ireland. He was Catholic. My mother's parents from Germany, but she was Protestant. And my father would like very much for his children to belong to the Catholic Church. And my mother said, "No way, Jose. No way." So we didn't go to church. Now, I'm in the 7th grade. I am a guard at the corners to keep the young children. Crossing guard. One day, a boy and girl came. I had my hands out like this, and the boy pushed my hand down, and with the girl, they walked across the street. She was pretty. Yes. So I tried to find out where they lived, and I found out they went to church. Now, they had a friend who went to church, and it's because this friend Lloyd, who was in the National Guard, went to church. They went to church, and guess what? Because they went to church, I went to church. Time marches on. The Sunday evening service at church, the pastor presented Jesus' qualifications for being the Son of God. And when he felt he had made his case that he was qualified to be the Son of God, and if you believe that, then I would invite you to come to the kneeling rail here and let us all know that you believe that. Well, Everett and Helen and Lloyd and I sat toward the back and didn't pay too much attention to what was being said. But on one occasion, when he issued that challenge, I had a feeling that, I don't know, something's happening. Maybe I should do that. If I feel like that next Sunday, I'll go. Next Sunday, same scenario. Same challenge. If you believe that, and I had a feeling I should go. Nah, if I feel like this next Sunday, I'll go. Well, next Sunday, dear friends, guess what? Helen and Everett's parents came to church on Sunday evening. They'd never been there before, and they never came again. Guess where they sat? On the front pew. On the front pew. How did we sit? Well, I wasn't sitting next to Helen. Here was Lloyd, Everett, Helen, Helen's mother, Helen's father, and the last space, me. I'm sitting there, looking straight ahead. Came the challenge from the pastor. We're all standing. And after he issued those last few words, I put the hymnal in the back of the pew in front of me, walked about as far as from here to where you're sitting, and I knelt there. And I knelt there, and I had a very strange, one-of-a-time event. It is as if a light came on inside of me and rose from about my waist up to my heart. And I had a feeling I cannot yet describe, except that I changed. Something changed. And I went home that night as happy as a lark. I never told my parents. Nobody up there with the pastor, after the service was over, pronounced the benediction, everybody's up and gone. Nobody from the pulpit came over to speak to me.
Just you.
The next Sunday evening, somewhere in the evening, the lay leader came to me and said, "David, we think that you ought to be baptized." What did I know? They never came to me when I was kneeling there. They never said anything. So it's fine with me. So I was baptized.
And so in 1940 then, when you were offered to, that must have been an incredible feeling to be offered to take that chaplain's position for a period of time.
Yeah.
Able to share that?
That's right.
Yeah.
Glad you mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working now.
Were you on the USS Nevada when that happened? I'm sorry, the Utah. Because the last ship you
Maryland.
served on,
The Maryland.
you were still on the Maryland. Okay.
Mhm.
Because in 1940, your last ship was the USS Utah. Okay. So tell us what happened.
This was a peacetime,
Okay.
and
Mhm.
I'll hasten through this a couple of sentences. They said I could sleep there if I wanted to,
Mhm.
so I did. And I had carried with me my conversion, my being, as the scripture says, born again.
Right.
So I'm in the chaplain's office. I do his work, and then I began to read the scripture. And so I lay down on my bed at the end of the day, and I'm lying there, and this message came to me. David, I'm going to make a preacher out of you. I kind of giggled. I said, well, we'll see. And that was the beginning. So that was...
Is that why you left the military to go into the seminary?
Yes,
Okay.
because I notified my pastor of this tete-a-tete. And he notified the congregation, and they said, we ought to recognize him as a trainee for the ministry. So when my first time was over, I went home. The Men's Brotherhood took me down to the college. They paid my tuition and everything else for my first semester there.
Were you married by this time? Had you met your wife? No?
No, I didn't get married until I was kind of older.
Okay, so then you went ahead into the seminary, and that was in 1940.
No, I just went to college because then came World War II.
Okay, where were you December 7th, 1941?
Where was I then?
That day when that
In
attack
Indianapolis.
in Indianapolis. Were you prepared? Were you expecting America to go to war? Had you heard tidings or warnings or?
I remember President Roosevelt calling the Congress together and all the nation announced what the Germans had done and declared us
the Japanese attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
What did you think?
Germany was before Japan.
Yeah, Germany was started in 1939, actually. But December 7th, 1941, that was that day that the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and America went to war. What were your thoughts about going back in the military? What made you go back in?
That's when I prayed, and he didn't answer.
You prayed to ask for guidance?
Yes.
What to do?
Because I wondered about killing another person. I could declare myself a conscientious objector. I would be in the service, but not in the fighting, rescuing people, doing a lot of stuff that needed to be done, and so forth. You can build that up. But since I got no answer, then I went ahead and joined.
And you said earlier that you joined because you started thinking about the different wars that God had
Yeah, it occurred to me afterwards
had his people
why I kind of chuckled to myself and said, I see why you wouldn't talk, because you sent millions of people into war and you killed a lot of people. And he did. But he's God. And he knows how to separate the people.
So you went back into the Navy again then?
I went
You
back
re-enlisted.
into the Navy. I did.
And you still were single? You were not married at this point?
That's right.
Okay. And you went, which ship were you? So when you went back in again, you didn't have to go through training again, did you? You'd already been trained?
That's right. I went down to the recruiting office, and I still had my uniform. So I went home, and I got my uniform, and put it on. I was not in the house, but anyway, I put on my uniform, put my civvies in a little satchel, went home, put that satchel up on the porch, then got on a streetcar, went down to the recruiting office, and they sent me then to Philadelphia, and I did then what they call put a ship in commission. It was the USS Tappahannock. It was a tanker. And I went there. My experience in the chaplain's office qualified me to be a yeoman.
Oh, okay.
And so I was the yeoman aboard the ship, and I was the only yeoman, and I worked for the captain. I was the captain's writer.
Jeez, okay.
Very important
Very
job.
important, yeah.
And we took that Tappahannock without escort down the Atlantic coast and through there and down over to somewhere here. Came down, got over here. I'm looking at the map here. I'm looking at the area of, we stopped in the Hawaiian Islands, and then we came to the Solomon Islands, and then we worked down there. And
You came across unescorted? Weren't you frightened?
What?
You came across the ocean without escort?
That's correct.
Wow, that must have been a little bit scary.
And not only that, but we carried a couple of those small craft, a fighting vessel. We had them aboard our ship. We got to where they were to go. We let them off. And the crew said to us, we'd a lot better be on our ship than to be on yours, because we were carrying all that fuel.
Yeah, so you came into the Solomons, and it must have been a lot going on at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was on, now, peacetime I was on big ships. And now I'm on the Tappahannock, which is a tanker, and then I'm on the Cygnus, Now the sickness was, I just don't know about that. It was a refrigeration cargo ship. You know what a refrigerator is?
Yeah.
Okay, you know what's in a refrigerator? And would you believe it? All we got to eat was bacon and eggs and roasts and
Steak.
ice cream. It was terrible.
Now you transferred onto that ship a little bit later. That was after the Battle of Guadalcanal. Were you on the USS? What ship were you on during the Battle of Guadalcanal when you went into that area?
The ship I was on was the Tappahannock.
Could you tell us about that battle?
Yes.
And your ship's participation in that?
Yes, I can. I was also the chaplain's writer. And so we were discharging our cargo to a place on an island here. So that means we had a long hose going from our ship over to a tank here. And now when we get everything set up, open the valve, we're discharging cargo, we get a message. The Japanese are coming. We cut those lines, got underway as fast as we could. My battle station on the Tappahannock was a split image rangefinder. A split image rangefinder looks like a tube horizontal. At each end is a prism, and the person operating this does a little moving of gears, looking out. So before he does his adjustment, he sees two images, do the adjustment, and the two images become one. And with that revolution comes a number. And you shout out that number, whatever it is, so that the guys with the guns can loft the guns at them. But these weren't ships. These were planes. Mm-hmm. You get my picture? Mm-hmm. So I had nothing to do. I was at my place. Mm-hmm. But everybody has his place, and someone else's place is not your place. Your place is your place. So I'm staying right there. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking aft. That's to the back of the ship. And here they come. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen? I could only watch. Here they come. At first I thought they were having a dog fight. You know what a dog fight is? Yeah. But it wasn't. They broke that up, and half of those planes came up one side of us, the other half came up the other side. The leading plane dropped a bomb. He was coming on fast, but he missed us. And that bomb dropped astern, and the ship went dead in the water, because when it exploded, it tripped all the circuit breakers on the ship. Mm. So there we were. And in the meantime, while we're slowing down, other planes are coming forward, they've moved out, and then they're coming toward us. and I'm standing there, and I'm thinking to myself, remember, I have been born again. I have not 1 ounce of fear. Not one. So I'm standing there and I see this plane coming, and I'm laughing and saying to myself, this is a prop plane. You know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
It runs by propellers. So I'm standing there and I wish I had a sack of potatoes, because I could throw the potatoes at that prop, slice the potatoes, splash the slices against the
Fuselage?
what?
The fuselage?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But of course I didn't have them. So,
They were that close to you, though.
but we made widows, sadly to say, people who fight a war. Well, I was about to say, we made a widow. I can imagine that when that happened. She's not going to get her husband back. Out of 3 of them.
Did you lose a lot of men on board your ship during that battle?
Did it do what?
Did you lose a lot of men on board your ship?
We
during
did
that
not
battle?
lose 1 man.
Oh, that was a blessing. Yeah.
We did not lose 1 man.
Mm-hmm.
After it was over, we go back to quarters, and we're in our quarters, and all the guys are laughing, but it's a nervous laugh. It's a nervous laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them said, boy, I prayed. Hey, Bill, did you pray? And Bill said, well, I thought about it. But I said to myself, you never prayed before. You got no right to pray now. But when I was up at my place on my position, I looked down. I'm up above the wheelhouse, and I look over my shell there, and I look down, and there are guys on their knees, literally scratching that metal deck with their fingers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a brutal battle. Brutal battle. Yeah.
Yep.
And you were quite an eyewitness to it in your life history.
Mm-hmm.
June 30th, 1942, you crossed... No, I'm sorry, September 2nd, 1942, you
Excuse
crossed
me,
the
but
equator.
can you
Yeah.
get a little...
September 2nd, 1942, you crossed the equator and you were duly initiated into the ancient order of the
Yes.
deep. Could you tell us what that is? Let me grab this and have you hold it and tell us about what is this ritual? Tell us about this.
All right. We knew this was going to
We'll
happen.
hold it. Tell me. I can actually hold it while he's talking. Is this better?
Yep.
Okay, how's that? Okay, Don, tell us about this now, if you would, sir.
We knew that was going to happen, and we were to be initiated. Well, what was the initiation? As we went over, we were going to be thrown into the water. But they didn't actually throw us into the ocean. But they made up a swimming pool that would be about the size of this room. 12 by 14, 16, something like that. And when you're taken in, we're thrown in the water one at a time, dunked and told to shout, what do we come? Shellback. Shellback. Yeah, pushed down and yelled shellback. So that went on, and my turn came, and they pushed me in, but they really didn't handle me because I wasn't one of them as far as religion was concerned. I was not embarrassed at all about having been born again. Mm-hmm. Aboard ship, I started a Bible study group. That makes a person look kind of weird to the non-Christian. So, but in any case, then...
Was this a ritual that was started hundreds of years ago, or what? Do you know the ritual, why this ritual is in place in the Navy?
It did become years ago. Mm-hmm. I have read this. I think something is said about this being an ancient ritual.
Okay, it does. You're right. It says Solomon Mysteries, having been found, you, David J. Lynch, Yeoman Second Class, having been found worthy to be numbered as one of our trusty shellbacks, he has been duly initiated into the Solomon Mysteries of the Ancient Order of the Deep. Okay, and it says, be it further understood that by virtue of the power invested in me, I do hereby commend all my subjects to show due honor and respect to him, you, wherever he may be. Disobey this order under penalty of our royal displeasure, given under our hand and sealed this date, September 2nd, 1942. And did they present this to you on board ship, or did you receive this later?
No, we got it.
Right then?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I put the...
That's beautiful.
It is.
That's beautiful. It's nice that you've kept that, you know. And so that was before you went into the battle of Guadalcanal. And when the battle was over, where did your ship go? Where did you go after you left Guadalcanal?
On the Tappahannock, as I mentioned, I was the captain's writer. Mm-hmm. And one of my jobs was, after a day's work, I would go up to the bridge and I would get the log. On the ship, a log is someone writing down in a book, in pencil, where they are, what they're doing as they go along. Each day I would go up there and get that, and I had a document blank book, so to speak, only loose leaf, and I would copy that down and put it in the book. Mm-hmm. Eventually, at some time, it'll get off the ship and back to the States and to the War Department.
Now, it says... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because we were in this war area around here, in this area, we had to cover our ports, windows, and the doors so that no light could shine out and catch the attention of the enemy. So we covered the ports. We took that cover off during the day, and the same the doors. So one morning I came out of quarters and we had two curtains, one here and another out here. You push this one here, push this one here, and go out. I pushed this one, I stepped over, and a huge round black was right in front of me. Hold the phone, what's happening here? I mean, this thing is big. So,
What was it?
chorioretinitis.
Oh.
Do you know
That's
what
why
that
you
is?
became ill. Wow, it happened that fast.
That's correct.
Yeah, because I see that you were hospitaled in 1944. Just that fast. Gee.
So I was off the ship,
Mm-hmm.
muy pronto,
Mm-hmm.
to a hospital on one of the islands. And that's when a new drug had come, penicillin, new thing, 3 times a day for 10 days. And at the same time came orders to head for home because they felt I would not be qualified to fight
Yeah.
with one eye.
Right.
But that didn't happen. But
What happened?
I was out of battle several times. So while I was in the hospital, I worked for the Red Cross. They were there. And while I'm waiting to recover, I volunteered, and for 2 or 3 months I'm there. Pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Still contributing, though. So then in 44, you were put back on another ship. After this was over, you went back onto another ship?
After the Tappahannock,
Mm-hmm.
I went to a different ship, the Cygnus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you got all that bum dough, all that food. Yuck. Steak.
Were you back in the United States on board that ship? Had they brought you back here to the U.S.?
I came back to the United States. I think I flew back. I would have to think about that, but I did come back.
Yeah, it says July 13th, 1944, you were transferred to this, July 13th, 1944, you were transferred to this ship. Yeah, and then were you stationed in the United States on that ship?
Which ship?
The last one that you were on, is it
The Cygnus?
The Cygnus, yeah.
I don't think. I'm trying to recall exactly whether I flew back or came back on another ship. It doesn't come to my mind.
That's okay. Did you remain on the Cygnus then until you retired, until you had your honorable discharge? Did you remain on that ship?
No, I was sent to Treasure Island. Do you know where Treasure Island?
By San Francisco.
Up by San
Yeah.
Francisco.
Wow.
Yes, I was sent up there and spent.
That's a beautiful place.
Yes. Does it say in my record there
Mm-hmm.
when I went?
Yes, you went to San Francisco then in, it looks like you were transferred at San Francisco in 1945, March 1st.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then you left the Navy then in
46.
1946.
And I was there.
And you were there when you left. Now, were you still single at this point? Had you not met your wife yet?
You know, I had.
You had met her?
I had met her once before.
Mm-hmm.
That's another story. But I met her once before. There was a Christian organization of the Christian organizations. Their center was in San Francisco. The man who led that lived in a very spacious home, and he made his home available to any servicemen at any time that they happened to be ashore. So I happened to be ashore one time, and I went to his house, and there were civilians there as well as service people. And so there was a girl there named Eleanor, and she was a student of the Bible Institute of Los Angeles, and she was a secretary to the leader of that organization, Dawson Trotman. And so I had to get back to the ship. I spent the night there. So they took me back in a Model A Ford with a back seat in the outside. But anyway, I was sitting next to her, and somebody else was driving. So I met her. And then I met her a second time after the war started.
It was meant to be.
Yep. Eleanor Marie Hill Lynch. We married there. Sad to say that it's been about 10 years ago now. She had a kidney problem. It failed. She died.
How many years were you married? How many years were you married? A whole lot. Sounds
A long
like.
time.
Yeah.
A long time, about 30 years.
You served during the wars then, or the war, you served in the Asiatic Pacific area, you served in Europe, you served in the Asiatic area.
Yes.
You served in, it says here, the European, African, Middle Eastern area. Your ships took you there to Africa and to the Middle East. Is that when you were on board the ships?
Well, let's take a look at this map here. Where's the United States? Must be somewhere over here. Where's Africa? Where's Africa? Way over there, right? Never there. Never there. Always here.
Always in that area. Okay.
Always in this area.
Okay.
And of course, here's Tokyo. A lot of people were over there, but I was down here in the Solomon Islands and Australia and Auckland, New Zealand. My ships, I also had the job of handling the mail. Everybody aboard ship writes to folks home here. So I had that job, which was a fascinating one. Let me tell you a little bit.
Very, very important for the morale, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those bundles of V-mail that would come through and letters.
That's true. Well, I had that job on the Tappahannock. And now I had a brother next to me, Justin David Bob. Now, as I mentioned earlier, after they heard I joined the Navy, they joined, and the war came on before their term of service ended, so they could not be discharged. They were in for the rest of the time. So he was down here also, but then one day we got words to hightail it up to Alaska. They needed some fuel up there. Straight line, no zigzag, go, go, go. So we went. And then while we met our place where we were to meet, and ships would come alongside, and we'd put a hose over, and we'd give them some fuel. And we let them know that we had a mailman aboard if they had any mail. So some bags of mail came aboard. So I'm standing there before my little boxes, and I'm picking it up, and I'm this and this, and I thought I'd see what that ship is that's alongside. Hail, hail, the gang's all here. My brother is on the ship whose mail.
You were taking. Oh, was that a wonderful reunion?
We couldn't, we had to have space between us to do this, but I called over there, and he got Bob, and he came to the side of the ship, and we shouted back and forth a little bit, and that was the last I saw him after he left that ship.
Did he survive the war?
You know, he did. A sad event occurred in that regard. At Pearl Harbor, Bob was on a capital ship, meaning I can't recall its name. And when the Japanese bombed and they hit his ship, and the next thing he knew, he was on a hospital ship. In the interim, we got a telegraph. Sorry to say, Robert O'Keefe Lynch was lost in action at Pearl Harbor. What happened? The bomb hit the side of the ship, and it began to sink. He was knocked unconscious by the explosion. The next thing he knew, he was in a small boat, searching boat, looking for guys and bodies to rescue. They pulled him on, took him to the hospital ship, and he was okay. So then they took him ashore to Hawaii, and he went someplace and mustered in, hey, here I am. And so we got the second message that, happy to say, he survived, and he lived to see. He lived to see a day when he became very ill for some unknown cause. We didn't live close together, and he died.
How old was he when he died?
Well, he would be, I'm 92, so he would be 90 now. But he since has died. But as I was about to say, he took sick of something and died. And he's in heaven. And he's objecting, talking to one of the angels. He tells us this later. I don't want to be here. I got a lot to do down. You mean you don't want to stay here? No. So he wakes up
in the hospital.
On the planet.
Wow. Yeah. It's quite the story.
But he was in the Navy too, and he was up in Alaska, and he did his part.
You both did your part. These are your ribbons from World War II.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to put them in the film because they're so wonderful. I'm going to just say a little bit, if I may. May I just say
You
what each of
surely
them
may.
are
You surely
and
may.
what they represent. This first part right here, maybe you could hold it up for me. Why don't I let you hold it right here? Just hold that up right there. Yeah.
Like you have
Yeah,
it?
that'd be great. And so this first part, there you go, that's perfect. This first part represents the American theater of operations in which, of course, you served during World War II. This second part represents the Asiatic Pacific with 3 battle stars on it, representing the battles that you fought in. This part represents the World War II victory part of your ribbon. And then this second ribbon that you have represents, this is the earlier one. This would be in before World War II, when you served in the late 30s. This is the National Defense ribbon. And then the European Mediterranean. And then this one is the Good Conduct that you received twice, and you have the star on that. These are
Now you must say that when these were awarded, the captain, as he handed it over, this Good Conduct Medal, says it only means they didn't catch you.
It's the first time I've heard anybody admit that. And this is your little ruptured duck, which you get when you leave the service, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what this is. Very famous little piece. A lot of people have heard about this and never seen one.
Is that
So this is wonderful to have this in your film, the little ruptured duck. Yeah. So you left the service. You were married. Did you have children?
I have a daughter and 2 sons.
And do you have grandchildren?
Yeah. Beth had 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so I have 3 grandchildren.
Now, when you left the service, did you go into the ministry then? Did that become your vocation, your calling for the rest of your life, or?
When I left the service, actually, it was before I left the service, but it was peacetime at this particular time.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I went into the ministry. The reason I was going into the ministry, I had read a book entitled With the Tibetans in Tent and Temple, about this thick.
Ugh.
But yay. I was impressed. Quietly made up my mind that I would go there. So I was in the Navy, on land, and I was going to a church, and I told the pastor about temple, going there with the Tibetans. And he said, well, David, I think if you're going to do that, we ought to ordain you. I said, well, that's up to you. Now, this was in a denomination, General Association of Regular Baptist Churches. They're all Baptist. They don't want to have like all being the same.
Mm-hmm. They have their individual
Yeah.
doctrines and beliefs.
Yes, right.
Uh-huh.
So he called the other members, pastors of other GARB churches, and so they came. they asked questions, and I answered them. And the last question they asked me was this: well, David, what if we don't ordain you? I said, that doesn't matter to me whether you do, because the scripture says, you have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you. I already have an ordination. Well, I got the ordination.
Did you have your just because in light of time we're going to have to come to a conclusion here with our film, but did you then remain in the ministry then until you retired, or as far as did you have a church?
Did I go into the ministry?
Yes, was that your profession?
Remember I said that aboard a ship, lying on the floor, this message came to me: David, I'm going to make a preacher, not a pastor, a preacher out of you. And yes, I did, for 31 years.
How did you end up in Boise?
How to make up what?
Why are you in Boise? How did you end up living in Boise? How did you end up living in Boise, Idaho?
How did I end up? Yes, my daughter Beth lived there, still lives there.
Oh, okay.
And my wife and I were living in New Mexico. And Beth wanted us to move up there. Sadly, she became quite ill and never made the trip. So I thought I might as well go up. The closest people. So that's how I got up there, up here.
Well, I have to tell you, it's been such an honor and a journey to spend this time with you, preserving your history on film. Certainly none of us ever know where our life path is going to take us, do we? And yours took you through some pretty interesting journeys. And we're just so proud that you're an American veteran, that our country has you. We feel like you're ours. We can never thank you enough for what you've done, the time that you took out of your life to fight for our country and be a part of preserving freedom around the world. And before we conclude this, I think what I'd like to ask you is, and this would be for your grandchildren perhaps, or maybe great-grandchildren down the line, how do you feel that your experiences during World War II, how did they influence or help form you to become the man that you are today? What lessons did you learn that you carried then through and became a part of who you are?
How did my World War II experiences?
What do you feel that you gained from that, or that you learned from your military experiences during World War II? What influence did that have on forming you to become the man you are today? What did you learn during those years?
I've never been asked that question before, but the answer exists. An answer exists. I went into the National Guard. In high school, I went into the Reserved Officers Training Corps, ROTC. I went into the Indiana National Guard.
And you were in war. You went through the Battle of Guadalcanal. you stayed in the military. You were in the military a long time, and it certainly must have had an influence on you, who you became in some way, in terms of maybe discipline, in terms of, did you feel that you became a more disciplined person because of those years in the military? Did you develop a certain feeling about your country because of those years in the military? What message would you like to leave your grandchildren about how your military years, being an American veteran, is a part of who you are as a person?
The word independent comes to mind. I have been independent. Now, how can you be independent when you're in an army or a navy or the Marine Corps? How can you be independent? Because that training makes you determine what you're going to do with the rest of yourself behind. You're up at Reveille and in the sack at TAPS, and you have specific things like working in a bank or for somebody else. You gotta give your time to them because they're paying you, but this isn't my life. So, and I'm reading the scripture, and one of the scriptures that I made personal is Psalm 136, verses 1 and 2. I love the Lord because He has heard my voice and my supplication, because He inclined His ear unto me. Therefore will I call upon Him as long as I live. So we have a relationship.
And that stayed with you all through the war years. Well, I just can't thank you enough. It's been such an honor to have you here today. We're very honored to preserve your history. And above all, we honor you and thank you for being an American veteran.
I am honored to have been invited, and thank you. Thank you, and may God bless you, each of you, in your own way.
Thank you.
Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your mind, and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your path. You can't get better training than that.